Hey, I'm Ethan Lumen, one of the pastors here at Peace. Welcome to Discovering More. This past weekend, we talked about addiction, which can be a pretty complicated topic. It comes with a lot of stigma and maybe pain, maybe hard memories to deal with. But this past weekend, what I wanted to do was really broaden out the topic of addiction, because we can think about maybe like the classic addictions of alcohol, drug abuse, and we can think of gambling and sexual pornography addictions, all that kind of stuff. But I think that addiction gets to the heart of every human, because it gets to misplaced desires. God has put it in our heart to desire things, to want things, and to enjoy things. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, it talks about how there's a time for everything, but right after it, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, all that kind of stuff. Right after all that, it says, God has set eternity in the hearts of man, yet he has made it so that he can't see the end of it. So we have eternity in our hearts. And right after that, in Ecclesiastes 3, it says, I have determined that there's nothing better than to enjoy the food you eat, enjoy the work of your hands, and enjoy your family. Enjoyment is at the center there of what it means to be human, to enjoy God and to enjoy the gifts that God has given us. So desire, enjoyment, it's part of our natural human existence. We can make addiction about moral failings, and we can see a lot of bad decisions made by people who get caught up in addiction, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's where it starts. I think we all can allow our desires to get out of control, and that's very easy, especially in a consumerist culture. Like, look, every time you turn on your phone, every time you turn on your TV, every time you turn on your radio, somebody's trying to sell you something that you probably do not need, or they wouldn't need to be selling it to you. You just go get it because you need it. So we're driven by all of these people vying for our attention, that we might have something that we probably don't need, that they're tapping into our desire. So it shouldn't be any wonder to us that so many people are struggling with addictions or overindulgences. Whether it's sugar or food related, whether it's technology related. There's so many different things that we can desire and want with sports. Come on. And it's not that these things are necessarily bad in and of themselves. It's that our desires get out of control. James chapter 1, that's what it says. It says, our desires gives birth to sin, and sin brings forth death when it's full grown. And again, that's the ultimate path, is that addictions steal our lives. Things start to steal our lives. And when things start to steal our lives, that's when we have to watch out. And that's what 1 Corinthians chapter 6 says. He says, you can do whatever you want, sure, but not everything's helpful. You can do whatever you want, but don't be dominated by anything. And that's the reality. You look at Proverbs, it talks about the adulterous woman and the lustful heart. And you can replace anything with adulterous woman there as kind of like the catch-all sin. That desirous thing, what it ultimately ends up doing is killing you. It ends up dominating you. It ends up getting you stuck in the pit. So you don't want to get stuck in the pit. So as we talk about addiction, the first thing is that even in the Alcoholics Anonymous, the first step is acknowledging that you're helpless on your own. And the statistics show, I'm not going to try to quote the statistics because I don't have them memorized, but any successful rehabilitation from alcohol or substance abuse, pretty much all of them have a spiritual component to them. It's the transformative power of the spiritual realm which helps most people escape from addiction. And why is that? Because we recognize that it's about something greater than ourselves. It's not me picking myself up by the bootstraps. No, it's me reorienting myself toward reality. It's me reorienting myself toward the spiritual realm and seeing my own life in light of the God who's given me this life. So that's the first step of AA, is to acknowledge that there's a higher power that we need. And you walk through all the steps of AA, and you can kind of see a framework built around a scriptural practice of repentance. turning from our sin and seeking restoration of all those relationships, because addiction causes damage, not only in our own lives, but in our relationships and in other areas too. So as we try to become immune to the power of addiction, I think it's essential that we start to set our desires in the right direction. So what can you start to add to your life that's going to help your desires in a more positive direction? How can you find more enjoyment around the food you eat, for instance? Can you, if you're eating alone often, can you invite someone over for dinner? Can you go eat in a public space even? How can you cook? Can you cook your meal from scratch? Like, how can you find more enjoyment in this thing that God has given you? How can you find yourself with those people that God has given you? I know in this technological age, people live so far apart from each other. Families live far apart from each other. But how can we find the value in that? And getting outside, right? Looking up at the stars at night, sitting in the sun during the day. How can we find enjoyment in the things God has put in our lives? So I would say, don't necessarily try to deprive yourself of desire. No, delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Psalm 37:4. That would be my encouragement for you this week. Don't overindulge, but seek to find the true joy that God places in the everyday of our lives. And I mentioned in my message too, like at the center of communion is wine and bread. We're Lutheran Christians, so we have real wine on our Sundays when we have communion. And part of that is because God has made things to be good, even wine. Yes, it can be abused, but God uses it in this meal to bless His people and remind us that we are loved, to remind us that we have a home and a meal to gather with our God and with our fellow Christians around. So find ways to find joy in life. And I think that'll help make us immune to the power of addiction in our world.